Hey guys, so today I wanted to look at the concept or the idea of using a CSS only toggle switch. This uses a checkbox, and we're going to use the new has select. When I say new, it's been around for a little while, but it's only really been recent that it seems to have got acceptance amongst developers as something that's broadly enough adopted to use on live sites. So we don't need any JavaScript to detect our changes anymore. It's just purely CSS. Kevin Geary did a video last week on doing a similar thing using, or almost the same thing, using a radio inputs. This one is using a checkbox, and you can use your space key to switch between or click anywhere to toggle. So it's a toggle, not a radio input. So with the radio input, you got to select which one you want. So click on free or click on pro. With this, it's just a toggle. Now, from an accessibility point of view, this is just a playground for me at the moment. I don't know enough to know whether it makes more sense for it to be a radio selector where you select A or B, or whether the toggle is okay. I guess it'll depend on what you're using it for. So that's the first question for me about accessibility. Does this work for accessibility? Certainly works as far as being able to use the keyboard. Also, there was another weird issue I found. If we look at the DOM here, on the label, I've got an ARIA label here. And I'm using the free NVDA Screen Reader for testing. I don't have anything else. And what I found is that in Firefox, it reads this label correctly. The screen reader announces this as switch uncheck for free, check for pro. Okay, that works beautifully. In Chrome on Windows, at least, when the screen reader gets to this label, it just reads it as blank. So I'm not sure whether I need to put something into the checkbox. I did actually try an ARIA label on the checkbox as well, and it made no difference. So whether checkboxes just don't work properly in Chrome for the labels for screen readers, or whether it's to do with the NVDA screen reader, I don't know. But if any of you accessibility gurus can shed some light on that, I'd really much appreciate it. So what I wanted to do here is not use JavaScript, use the has selector, same way as what Kevin did, but using a no JavaScript, so just a checkbox. So heading over to the builder, the bricks builder, the way I've built this out, I'm just going to expand all of that out. I've got what I've just called a toggle switch. Okay, and the toggle switch is just a wrapper here, and then I've got another div I've added, and I've made that a field set. That's all I've done to that. I've got some BEM naming on here as well. I've got a legend, so it's just another. It's a basic text input, which I've made a legend. I've got a div that I added, which I made a label. So that's my primary label. Being a checkbox, we don't have two labels. So the radios, you would have a separate input, separate label. We've got one label for the checkbox. Again, that's a custom import. So a custom div set to input. Then I've got two spans for my label, for my free label and my pro label. I've got those separated into two separate spans so I can control them separately. So that's the difference between having it as main difference between having it as a radio or checkbox. I've only got the one label. So we've got to separate these two out as two spans, and then we can treat them differently depending on whether that checkbox is checked or not. So that is our structure. That is our simple structure that we have. All of this is controlled from CSS on this wrapper up here, which I've called toggle switch. And that is the core of it. I'll come back to how it works. But then what I then have is, so if we look at this inside there, we've got a single, is this a container? It is. So container, inside that container, I've got a block here, which is content wrapper. I mean, this could just as easily be a section, and these could be containers, however you want to do it. So I've got a content wrapper here, which I've called my checkbox-based content wrapper, okay? And inside of that, I've got a wrapper here, which is another block, and that's my state 0 content. So I've got a default Ben name, and then I've got one specifically for this set here. And that's the one I want to control because we want to control it separately depending on its use in the editor. So I've got a state 0 content with some basic text in it. I've got a state 1 content with some basic text in it. All right, and that is the content. So all we're doing is switching this toggle here, and that's switching which of these is visible. Now, if we look at the content wrapper here, probably best to work backwards, and then we can show you exactly how that works with the switch. If we go back to this content wrapper here, we've got CSS. All I'm doing with that content wrapper is when we're on the bricks front end, so I want to be able to see these in the editor. So I'm making sure we, as part of our selector, we're looking at the bricks front end only. We want to make the display of that a grid, and we're for both of the divs underneath it, or both of the first elements underneath it. That could just easily be a star or an asterisk. We want to set in the grid row 1, grid column 1. So that puts them both on the same row, same column. So it's a single column, single row grid, and one sits on top of the other. You could do this using absolute positioning if you want to. I like doing it this way. It's just very clean and simple doing it that way. And that is our content. So there's our free content and there's our pro content. And it's as simple as that as far as the content goes. Oops. There we go. So that's it. Simple as that as far as the content goes. The important thing is here is that we have a state 0 content there, and we have a state 1 content on that one there. So I found it easier. Rather than going checked and unchecked, I'll just call it state 0 for unchecked, 1 for checked. It's just simpler for writing out these labels. All right, so if we head to the actual toggle switch, CSS on the toggle switch, up here at the top, we've just got a bunch of variables, which I'll come back to. We're using a where selector, so we reduce the specificity of these. It just allows us to override those a little bit further up the DOM if we wish to. And it's a smart way of doing it because you have less specificity issues when you're defining your variables. What did I do? Let me just refresh. I've obviously clicked something that I shouldn't have. What has happened? Here we go. So I'm running this on local, and maybe that's just, no, it's just hasn't timed out. Okay, so, all right, so heading to the CSS for that switch. Let's figure out the actual variables for it. We'll come back to those. So what we're doing is our field set is our outer wrapper. The field set is containing our legend, it's containing our checkbox, it's containing our label. So the field set is our outer wrapper. So we're going to set our basic transition on it. We don't want any padding on it. We want to set a border on it. So just a outline of that, whatever you want. The radius, I'll just make that a big number so that it rounds the edges here without being a ellipse. Because if you set that to a percentage, it's percentage of height and width. With CSS, there's a strange thing. If you set it to a number bigger than what it actually is, it just rounds that edge without being a weird shape. So field set, position relative, and set our track background. So the background color of that field set is our switch. So on the field set, we're going to use the before pseudo element. We're going to create a absolutely position empty block, set our background color. Inset block is our inner padding. So from the top and the bottom of that, so that's positioning it from the whatever the padding is. I think I've got set to 3 pixels up here at the moment. I have. So back to here. So inset block is 3 pixels top and bottom. Inset inline start and inset inline end. This is what we're using to move our switch from unchecked to checked. And it's a very simple calculation. So up here, our inline inset inline start is just our inner padding. So that's our 3 pixels. And our inset inline end is 50% across. So this is from the right. So from when you say the inline end, so it's from the right. So it's 50% plus the inner padding. So it's 50% plus the 3 pixels to give us that exact same spacing from left to right. And that's as simple as that calculation is. The rest of this is not relevant. And then all we do further down, which we'll come back to when we look at how the switch works, is when our checkbox is checked, we're just going to reverse that. So our inset inline start is going to be 50% plus the inner padding. So that's going to go 50% along plus the inner padding, and the inset inline end is just going to be our inner padding, which would be 3 pixels from the end. And that's how we're switching between the two states for the background switch. That's that part there. Our checkbox, we just want to get rid of it. We want to hide the default HTML rendered checkbox. I did find when we had it from the top, negative from the top, when I used the space key to change the state, it would scroll up the screen thinking the checkbox is at the top of the screen. So by making it off to the left, that solved the problem. Then our label, so that's the outer label. So remember we only got one label because we've got one checkbox. So outer label, no margin, display grid, 2 columns, position relative, and line height and font weight for that label. Very simple. Then we're going to look at the span. So the 2 spans, so label for state 0, label for state 1, or label not state 0, label 0 and label 1, so left and right label. Should actually probably call that left and right label now that I think about it. So both of those we set to flex, set the place content into the center, so that would be the actual text inside those, and our label padding, which gives us really the size of our switch. So it's the padding, block padding and inline padding of those, which we set up here. So if we wanted more block padding, let's add more block padding. If we want more inline padding, I can add more inline padding. So make those switches nice and big. So there you go there. So you just change the size just by changing that label padding there. All right, so that's those. Now, then what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the label 0 and label 1, so both these labels, and we're going to set the display to flex. Oh, actually, sorry, I just went through that. I'm going to get myself confused here. All right, label 0, so the first label, we're going to set our color to this variable of label 0 color. And that's because we want to change that color in the different states, okay? So look at the one on the right, that we're orange. When it's selected, it's white. Okay, so label 0 color, label 1 color. All right. Now, all we know to do now is switch variables. So when the checkbox inside there is checked, so when the element, so we're on, what are we calling this? Toggle switch here. When toggle switch has a check status inside this, it's only the one checkbox. We're going to change our inline start to be 50% plus the inner padding across, and the inline end to just the padding. So it's just 3 pixels from the end. We're going to change our track background color to be one of our state 1 background color. So state 1 being checked. We're going to set our switch background color to the check switch background color, and we're going to change our label colors based on that. So when that has the check value, just change these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 variables to change what happens here. All right, that is it. That is as simple as that goes. And if we look at the actual CSS variables up here, this is the typical stuff. You know, the border, you don't need to go through this, border color, the switch inner padding. So how much space do we want between the edge? So if I made that say 5 pixels, we get a much bigger space between the field set and the switch. Make it 3, 2, 1, 0 if we want it right up against the edge. I kind of like it at 3. Okay. Switch padding, so the block padding and the inline padding for the switch itself. Are we using that? Let me just check that. Nope, that's a legacy from playing with it, so we're not using that at all. Okay, so we're using the label padding instead to switch that out, I should say. All right, now our state 0, so unchecked track background. We're going to use a fallback, so we're either going to use the state 0 track color if it's defined, or we're going to fall back to this white with transparency. State 1, so the checked track background color if that's defined. Otherwise, fall back to this, what have we got, a green with transparency. Okay, And then we're going to set our actual track background color to be defaulting to our state 0 because it's unchecked by default. So set the state background color that, and then down in our has here, we're just going to change our background color to state 1 when it's checked. All right, and then the same for all these others. So I probably should have changed some of this wording here. So we've got our unchecked label color, checked label color, and we're going to set our default label 0 color to be the unchecked value. And the same with the other colors here, same with the switch. So set our unchecked and checked states, and then going to set our default state to be that. And then this is just the other calculations we talked about. So that's it. That's all there is to the actual switch. Now, at the moment, I've got colors here, whereas what I'm defining here are just some basic colors. So where that's changing, if I go up the DOM, so I go up to the Free Pro here, and just make sure we've got no class selected, just on the element here, on the div, sorry, on the ID level. That's where I'm setting my colors. So if I get rid of all this, what we end up with is the default colors. So the default colors there. That's the defaults that are defined on the toggle switch. And all we're doing is to create a separate set. We're just overriding these track state 0 and state 1 colors. And that's all we're doing to make this unique. All right. So how this becomes reusable is, let's say we duplicate that entire set. We're going to call this monthly and yearly. So what we need to do is go to our CSS for that at the ID level. And we're going to change our state 1 color to, we'll make that secondary. And we'll use that the same for that. And that's just the free and pro. You can change the other one if you want to. I'm just going to leave those there. So I'll just show you just by changing those two there. And my state 0 label 1 color, state 0 label 0 color. It's white, so it's white when we're unchecked. The first label is white when we're unchecked, and it is a state 1 label 0 is action light. We don't want that. We want secondary. Let's just put secondary on there. Oops. Okay. So let's see what that looks like now. So we've got our toggle switch here, free and pro. We've got the purple and orange. We've got green for free, orange for pro. Now the rest of it, we come back to our labels. I'm going to make that monthly and make this one yearly. Okay, we'll go to our label itself, go to the ARIA label and uncheck for monthly and check for yearly. All right, now we have a copy of that where we've got a different set of colors. We've got monthly and yearly, and this should be announced differently as well. So all we've had to do is change 3 things, or 4 things really. We had to change some colors on that at the ID level on that. We had to change 2 labels, and we had to change an ARIA label up here, and we've changed the way that whole set works. So yeah, it functionally, I think it's really good. It works really well. From an accessibility point of view, I'm just unsure. And if there's anyone out there that really understands the impact of accessibility on this, I'd love to hear from you. Again, this is just a playground. I haven't used this on any live sites, and I won't use it on any live sites until I'm happy that this is the right way to go. So I'd love some feedback, guys. Just gurus, please tell me what you think. I might actually chuck this up onto a gist and put it into the comments. So you can grab the template if you wanted to have a play with it, and then let me know what you think. Thanks, guys.